Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bloomberg Businessweek Weekend podcast. Well, yeah, safe to say, pretty big week for investors. We got the Fed decision, the last one of 2024. The Fed lowering the benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point as expected, lowering it for a third consecutive time. Members also reining in the number of cuts they expect in 2025. That was a surprise to investors and brought about an immediate market reaction, with U.S. Treasury yields shooting up and U.S. stocks selling off. The S&P 500 had its worst Fed day since 2001. Fed Chair Jay Powell signaled greater caution over how quickly the Federal Reserve can continue to reduce borrowing costs.
But as for additional cuts, we're going to be looking for further progress on inflation, as well as continued strength in the labor market. And as long as the economy and the labor market are solid, we can be cautious about as we consider further cuts.
And so this hour, we talked to one bank CEO who joined us right after the Fed decision to get his read on the strength of the economy, and another check on the U.S. economy and the consumer. That came thanks to the CEOs of two very different companies who both happen to be cutting prices. One certainly a household name, and the other maybe especially if you recently had a baby.
Also on our radar this week, sustainable energy solutions and how geopolitics are impacting investments in sustainable energy infrastructure, with an investor who has billions invested in the space.
All of that to come. We start with this week's Fed decision. The expected hawkish rate cut still caught investors by surprise, sparking a sell-off in equities and bonds. U.S. Treasury rates moving up. Bank stocks sensitive to monetary policy moves dropped the most in months right after the Fed decision.
That included shares of the publicly held New Jersey-based ConnectOne Bancorp, which is the parent company of ConnectOne Bank. The bank has nearly $10 billion in assets and counts small businesses and construction companies among its customers.
Frank Sorrentino is chairman and CEO at the bank, which has a $911 million market cap. He began by telling us what stood out to him following the Fed's decision.
I find it always fascinating that good news brings negative markets, right? So a stronger economy and a place where people are doing well and strong employment and all the other things that define a more robust economy, and the market sells off. So certainly, I don't think there was any surprise to today's Fed action. Interest rates being lowered by 25 basis points, some rhetoric around future cuts not being as much as the market wanted. And I think that's what really drove a lot of the sell-off. So there was a lot of enthusiasm and optimism, certainly in the banking system, about much lower interest rates. Well, that's not really going to happen. On the flip side, I think we're going to start to see potentially a steepening yield curve for banks. And so ultimately, I think it will be a good thing.
One reason we love talking to you, and if people were paying attention to you anytime in the last 2 years when you've been on our program, then they wouldn't be surprised at how good the economy has been over the last couple of years, because you repeatedly were beating that drum saying the companies that are lending with us, the companies that are our customers, the small businesses, the construction companies, they are doing well right now. How are they doing compared to over the last 2 years for you?
I think I've said this before. What we are seeing today, we are still in quite a robust economy. The vast majority of our clients are reporting good news. Is there some normalization going on within the economy today, from all the post-COVID, the monetary policy, the expansion of the Fed balance sheet, liquidity in the system? Sure. Is that all beginning to normalize and we're getting to a more consistent with historical norms relative to interest rates and growth rates and everything else? Yes, that's happening. Is anyone really saying that the economy is weak today? I don't see it. Our clients are still saying it is difficult to hire staff today. People are demanding more money. Supplies cost more. There is a little bit of inflation still within the economy, but certain things are beginning to level off. Rents are beginning to level off a bit. Potentially housing prices are reaching a point where they're becoming, I don't want to say unaffordable, but they're certainly reaching the edge of people's affordability spectrum. Interest rates are playing a role there. there's been a lot of desire to see interest rates come down a bit. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we are in a very strong cycle, and I think it's going to continue. Well, certainly, if you think about everything that we're talking about doing in this next next administration, these things all have some inflationary component. So we are going to see a strong economy in my opinion, as far as the eye can see.
So, Frank, then why did the Fed cut rates? Which is the question I think our Mike McKee asked. Like, I feel like this is the 5-year-old to Jay Powell. Why? So why? Why cut rates if the economy is robust, like you say?
I think the data that the Fed was looking at, they're looking in longer term, segments of time, and they have what they want to get to, which is a neutral rate. And I think this is part of their program to get there. I don't serve on the Fed, so I don't know for sure. I don't know exactly what data they're looking at, but clearly they're seeing signs that they can get to a certain point in the interest rate curve on the short end that meets with the program that they believe brings us full employment, low inflation, and gets the economy to continue to move on.
One thing we wanted you to weigh in on is the political environment, which we know that CEOs don't love to do, but this is the world we live in. What does, another 4 years of Donald Trump mean to you, given what we learned about him 2017 to 2021? How are you preparing for it?
I try to look at the economy. I try to look at our clients. I try to look at how these things are going to impact them. And the only thing that concerns me is creating a level of uncertainty. And, the one thing that business and the economy really wants is certainty. They want to understand where things are headed, how can they make plans, and how can they go about running their lives, running their businesses. And whenever there's any level of uncertainty and, talking about the federal budget and whether we're going to fund it or not, and whether people are going to get paid, government employees, that creates uncertainty, and that's generally just not good.
So how frustrating is that for you? You've got to make decisions. How hesitant are you to do things because you're not quite sure of the policy that's going to come from this White House?
You know what? I whether it's this administration or any other administration, I look at, what's going on the ground, and I am very bullish about what I see, certainly in our market area, certainly around what we're doing here as a nation. We are the greatest nation on the planet. We live in one of the greatest parts of the nation. I'm very bullish about our economy. And so I make those decisions, and, we all here at Connect One make those decisions based on what our clients are telling us and what their needs are. And so we feel pretty good about where things have been. Yeah. As you said, I've been saying the same thing for the last couple of years, and where things are going.
Our thanks to Frank Sorrentino, Chairman and CEO at Connect One Bank Corp.
Another read on the U.S. economy came courtesy of the Swedish home furnishing giant IKEA. Last month, you might recall, Bloomberg News reporting on how IKEA shoppers will continue to see lower prices at its stores in 2025. But the company warned not to expect anything like this past year.
After slashing prices for retailers by 15% in 2024, which enabled IKEA stores to cut prices to consumers by 10% and was, quote, exceptional, more normal levels are in the cards, according to Henrik Elm, Chief Financial Officer of Inter IKEA Group. It's the worldwide franchisor for the brand.
With a take on the U.S. consumer and how IKEA stores are doing in the United States, Bloomberg's Emily Grafeo and I checked in with the U.S. CEO of IKEA, Javier Quiñones, who is also Chief Sustainability Officer.
Yeah, 24, it's been a challenging year, I would say, from, of course, inflation, interest rates, and we've seen this in retail, especially in the home furnishing industry. That's why, as you said, a big part of our commitment was to bring back lower prices as we have ever been, because due to inflation, we, of course, had during 23, especially some increase of prices that we had to do. And by doing that, what we have seen during 24 is that we have actually managed to sell more pieces than previous year, which is a fantastic achievement in an economy where it's not been on all the time on our side, I would say.
So cutting prices actually moved the needle and brought consumers to spend more.
It did indeed. I wouldn't say to spend more, but I would say that this strategy was actually to be closer to many more people. And we like to say IKEA is for the many people, right? And we understand that the many has limited resources or means, right? So for us, it's not about probably spending more, but it's actually to make sure that the IKEA products are available and affordable for many more people. That's why I like to measure more number of customers during 24, because of course the top line, when you reduce prices, you can expect a drop or a slightly drop, right? But what tells you that you're doing the right thing is when more people can afford IKEA products.
So accessibility, right? Lowering the prices and really opening it up to more people.
Right. And maybe that receipt is not as big as it would have been a few years ago. What are you seeing in terms of what shoppers are actually buying? Are they still going for those big ticket items, or is it more a shopping cart that just has some smaller goods in there?
You know, the home furnishing market goes hand in hand with the house market, right? What we see right now is the housing market at some of the lowest we've ever seen, right? When it comes to demand. So we see both sides. We see small changes through more on the accessory side. That's a big demand. We see some people that are not moving, selling, or buying new houses that go into rebuilding or refurbishing of the existing ones. So we see a little bit of both. We don't see one taking over on the other. But as I said, I think it's been more on the price sensitivity than anything else. What we see, though, is an increase on the demand for sustainable products, right? Products that actually help you to save cost in your bills, like the energy bill, right? When you move to LED, or food is an interesting one, right? Many people ask, what can I start doing? Well, you know, on the energy, changing by LEDs, appliances that are efficient. Food, it's an important one, especially in the US, when 1/3 of what we buy goes to waste, right? So food containers is, I would say, one of the best friends to actually help people to save money, or water dispensers that reduce the flow. So these are some tips, and we see more and more also demand on these products, which is fantastic, I have to say.
Just very quickly, how is the digital business looking for IKEA? Because you guys are known for your in-store experience. Are you continuing to focus on that, or are you seeing more people come to your website?
Yeah, well, we see more people coming to the website. We see more people starting on the website. And then where they finish, it's, I would say, not even relevant or important, right? The stores, the way I see them, are I cannot imagine a most beautiful place in the world to actually get inspired about home furnishings than an IKEA store. So there will be a super key in our business, and we will keep investing in digital because it's where the growth, or most of the growth, is happening.
Our thanks to Javier Quiñones, U.S. CEO of IKEA and Chief Sustainability Officer. Our thanks to Emily Grafeo for co-hosting while I was out.
Coming up, another CEO cutting prices thanks to a recent strategy move and acquisition. The CEO of the baby formula company, Bobby, is next.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
The baby formula company Bobby recently announced a sweeping 15% price reduction for its classic organic infant formula. The price reductions are, in the company's own words, an active step on behalf of the mom-led company to support families who are experiencing rising costs of living. And as we heard from the Fed this week, inflation, still a little bit of a problem, Tim.
A major factor for this price reduction? Opening a 90,000 square foot infant formula manufacturing facility in Ohio to produce this formula. So while many companies raise prices due to inflationary pressures, Bobby's one of those companies that's actually cutting them.
Yeah, they are. Laura Modi is co-founder and CEO of Bobby, and she kicked off our conversation with why the price cuts and how they got there. She talked with Bloomberg's Emily Grafeo and me.
It was very intentional. I'll bring you back. Everyone remembers the infant formula shortage of 2022. We made a very intentional decision to buy manufacturing at the time and to invest in the heartland of the country and really own our own production. I mean, the initial goal was really to own our own quality control, production control, also to be in a place where we had resilient supply. God forbid there was another shortage, we were in a position to be able to serve the market.
So you wanted to have supply right here in the U.S. market?
Correct.
Yeah.
the industry wasn't resilient enough. America wasn't resilient enough. We were at a point where America wasn't able to feed babies. Now, through that investment, which has taken an entire 2 years, a lot of capital and a lot of time, we knew that if we did it right, we could also reduce the costs as well. And I rewind to that moment and being in a position of saying, if we got to that place, we would pass the savings over to our customers. And we're there.
How did you reduce the costs?
I mean, it's owned production.
Okay.
So you bring it in-house. You have your supply chain from a more local perspective.
So just not importing product has been
reducing
okay.
imports.
Okay.
And, but also we were manufacturing a lot through using co-men. Through now our owned facility and opening up our own manufacturing and making those investments, they're starting to pay off. Just scale.
And why do that instead of using that extra money to, reinvest in the business, especially in an environment where all of your other competitors are still raising prices?
Yeah, I've had this debate now a few times. And, I'll first say, even as a mother of 4, I feel the inflation. I feel it. I feel it in grocery stores. You see it with basic pantry products. And I think the election was a big wake-up call that people were voting with their pockets. You saw it. Inflation is an issue. And I'm not making any product. We're feeding babies.
Yeah.
We are making one of the most important products out there. And it should also be, if you're able to, while not compromising on quality, also accessible.
Laura, based on what you are doing, and we've talked to various global architectural firms who talk about designing, building in Mexico, or closer, or even here in the US, closer to home. I'm curious, that you show that you can kind of do it and it does impact the cost equation. What about labor though? What about, I'm just curious about that argument, which has often been against moving things back here in the United States because labor costs are so high.
I mean, look, it takes having to take several steps back. Initially, the costs are high, investment needs are big, but over time, you see that returned. And we have. I mean, yes, our investments have been substantial, but over time, being able to centralize it, keep it close to home, have fewer steps in the process, you should be able to see costs go down.
Is it all automated? Forgive me, because I did talk about the cost of labor, but how much of the process is automated?
No, I mean, we have a lot of fabulous staff at our manufacturing facility. And, I will say nothing makes you feel more patriotic than seeing the manufacturing labor who is making this product one by one. It's incredible.
So this 15% price reduction on your classic organic infant formula, this came recently, but I'm wondering, how has business been in response to that move so far?
I'll first start just with the sentiment. It's the most rewarding. We didn't just roll this out for new customers. We have tens and thousands of subscribers who are receiving their product every month. They signed up for a particular price. And when we made the decision, we said, well, we're not just going to do this for new customers. We're going to retroactively change the price for our existing subscribers too. And it builds loyalty, love. We received, a ton of emails in response saying they've never seen a company do anything like this.
Tell us about subscribers and subscription. That is your model, right?
That is our model.
So what have you seen in general in that kind of growth? Prior to the price cuts, I'm just curious, since this is relatively new.
Infant formula is, it's repeatable, it's predictable.
Right.
But because of the infant formula shortage, there's been this PTSD and fear over not being able to get your product and supply. And you're feeding your baby. You want to know that your product is arriving to you when you need it and that there's never going to be a gap. So one of the things we implemented was guaranteed supply when you sign up for us. So as a subscriber, even if there's ups and downs in supply chain, even if you're not able to find it at Target, as a subscriber, you will always get a guarantee on your supply. We also rolled out...
How did you do that? How did you do that? Because that means you had to make sure you either had stuff in a warehouse or something.
It's modeling. It's all modeling.
Okay.
To put very simply, it's making sure that we're not bringing on subscribers at a rate that we can't replenish.
So you would have said maybe no to a subscription if it meant that you couldn't keep that promise.
Correct.
Okay.
And months ago, we were finding that you weren't able to sign up because we were trying to catch up with supply. But if you do sign up, we will guarantee that we will have that supply for you.
For how long?
For your entire journey. Yes. And we also implemented inflation-proof pricing as well, which through this rollout of reducing prices has been a promise that even if inflation goes up, and hey, we might go in another direction where the cost of our product will go up, but we will never change it on subscribers.
How do you do that though? What if your prices double?
Well, look, our prices may go up. They may. But for our existing subscribers who signed up one day and they said, I'm signing up for a certain price and I expect it not to go up, we're going to promise them it won't. But for new customers, they may see a change.
Okay, interesting. Hey, the U.S. election outcome, I don't know, you run a business. You've got to be watching very closely. Everyone we talk to is just trying to kind of game this out. What are the issues that are top of mind for you as you look and get ready for a second Trump White House?
You know, I think within the infant formula space, we're seeing a lot of talk around making America healthy again. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there should be a bigger push on this. We've been so focused on the next election and not the next generation. What are they consuming? How are we raising standards? What is the quality of our own supply chain, food, nutrition? And I am watching this very closely in hopes that we're going to see a bigger shift towards a healthier country.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, maybe for people who aren't familiar with Bobby and your product, what makes it different than other baby food formula? Purposefully sourced.
At the end of the day, infant formula needs to match breast milk. So the same carbs, proteins, and fats, your baby needs to get the same nutrition. That's really important. But where those ingredients come from, the quality of both how it's produced, and it's the sourcing, making sure that everything from how it's extracted to where it's farmed, we are one of the only USDA organic infant formulas on the market.
Laura, you know, one thing I think about with all, I feel like, Emily, this may come in front of you. I know Tim and I have a lot of conversations about this, but with climate change and how that is impacting certainly farmers, food production around the globe. How has that become more complicated, if it has at all, in terms of what you guys are doing?
It has gotten more complicated, but I still think the uncertainty, the unknowns are ahead of us. So we're just watching it closely.
Meaning it could get worse.
It could.
You expect it to get worse. Yes. Going back to, we talked about the Trump administration, Robert F. Kennedy, his nomination to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Yes, there's vaccine skepticism by some, but there's also his concerns, as you said, that you referenced earlier, about our food supply and how food is made. Your knowledge and experience of going through this process, co-founding this company, running this company, what have you learned about how food is produced in the United States, be it infant formula or just in general? What can you share?
You stumped her a little.
Yeah, you did actually. And you know what's interesting about this question? At the end of the day, we have to turn to food. And I feel this deeply in the world of infant formula. Creating fear and fear-mongering is not a game anyone should be in. I think it's really, really important. Availability, affordability, just access is important. The private sector, like myself, it's our responsibility to raise the bar. But we have to be very careful in how we are growing and improving standards, and at the same time, not having people walking around fearing everything they're picking up.
Right.
So I am very hopeful that the awareness of raising the standards is out there. And while we're doing it, let's also give each other a little bit of grace around what we're eating today.
Are the standards too harsh then on what goes into baby food formulas, or are they too lenient?
Another big debate we could go into for hours. It depends on what standards you're talking about. I think from a nutrition standpoint, we should be looking a lot harder at what the latest science is. We should be trying to remove regulatory hurdles to get in new and better ingredients. And at the same time, we also need to raise the regulatory barrier to make sure the quality and safety of the product continues to have oversight. You want your product to be high quality and safe at the same time. You shouldn't be compromising one for the other.
Interesting perspective. Laura, thank you so much.
Of course.
Are you finding all the funding you need? Can you stay private?
I hope so, for as long as we need.
Good stuff. Look forward to another update soon down the road. Laura Modi, co-founder and CEO of the baby formula company Bobby. Really great perspective and take on her industry, and just fascinating to see what they were able to do in terms of pricing in an environment where it's not always so easy.
And female-founded and a mom-led company.
Yeah, love that.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
All right, everybody. Well, our Bloomberg News team reporting that the House Judiciary Committee said it's found, quote, substantial evidence of collusion and anti-competitive behavior by the financial industry to impose radical ESG goals on U.S. companies. An interim report published by the Republican-led committee said, quote, a cartel of financial firms and climate activists sought to replace ExxonMobil board members in 2021 after the company declined to make a series of climate pledges.
Here's what Jonathan Maxwell has to say about this and sort of the changing tone of ESG over the last few years. He's founder and chief executive officer of SDCL. It's short for Sustainable Development Capital, LLP. SDCL has more than $2 billion in assets under management. He's also the author of The Edge, How Competition for Resources is Pushing the World and Its Climate to the Brink, and what we can do about it. Jonathan joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. Thank you.
Well, we're going to talk about sort of what competition for resources is doing, because it's super interesting. But I'm curious about your thoughts on the way that ESG has sort of turned into this four-letter word over the last few years. You see what's happening in Texas with the Attorney General there. What do you make of it?
I mean, the trend's been going on since about 2022. It's actually, I've got a whole chapter in my book about greenwash and ESG. And there was this was after a very big period of assets being gathered in ESG funds, like a huge boom in sustainability ESG. And then the tide turned. But there is something. I mean, my company's called Sustainable Development Capital, SDCL, so I'm kind of in the business. But there is something there where if you're in the business of sacrificing returns on the altar of the environment, this is the sort of the financial and sort of intellectual side of the story, then that is against the fiduciary duty of the fund manager and of the pension scheme manager. And I think there's a lot of noise running around this sector, but the idea that you should take capital from capital that needs to be invested for financial return and sacrifice or compromise the job of investing, I think is a very challenging area. By the way, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think not only necessary, I don't think it should be done. And I think that investors will get sued and companies will get sued for doing it. And I think it's as
simple as that, isn't it?
It really is. And when I think about sustainable, my company's called Sustainable, but it doesn't say giving money away. It says sustainable means for me commercially sustainable. In fact, if it's not commercial, it's not sustainable.
Didn't we get lost? I keep thinking about this. When ESG came out, I think we all thought was about doing good. And it really was about environmental sustainability and governance issues, right, that could financially impact a company. Right. And then you have things like impact investing or something. That's a whole different thing, right? Like, tell us a little bit about how the world is evolving and how we look at this. Because if we, investing to do good versus, I don't know, help me out here to kind of understand where this space goes.
I think that I'll give you something that's a little bit optimistic, because we talked about resources and the rest of it. So, I think we're currently in a very hardline environment, right? What do I mean by that? The political headwinds are against it. You've got, let's say, a pushback against climate or woke capitalism. You've got regulators and you've got local...
Meanwhile, the world is kind of burning around us.
Right, but I'm just giving you the headwinds to start with. I'm not going to give you a tailwind in a second, pretty substantial one.
Sorry.
Right, but we're also under serious economic pressure, right? And we've got inflation. We were talking just before the show started about how inflation's partly driven by energy prices. So, it's a difficult environment that we're working in. Okay, so what do we do about it?
Right.
You look at the problem, and here's the thing, and this is why I think that this is what I focus my investments on. When I look at what's wrong with the energy system, one of the things that stands out to me, and it's the same in food and water, is that most of it's wasted. I mean, it's very, very, very infrequent people actually talk about this.
Actually, we talk about, it's a lot about food waste. And here you have people who have no food, and then the amount of food waste, and then the impact that has on the environment. But forgive me, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's incredibly important. About half of the world's food is wasted. About a third of the world's water is wasted. So it wouldn't necessarily surprise you if I said that roughly 3/4 of the world's energy gets wasted. you break it down, extraction 10%, generation, because about half of the world's energy gets lost as heat in the generation process. You put gas or uranium into a power plant.
How come we're not better with that?
Why? Because we've built a centralized energy system in America and Europe over the last 40, 50 years. We've vented heat, and then we build what's now old transmission and distribution lines. And you put it all together, it just doesn't make the sense that it did over the last 50, 60 years. We also now, and this is the exciting part, we also have solutions to this problem. I know it's astonishing, but we actually have solutions to this problem. Part of the problem is you generate energy in one place and then you use it in another. And then we keep talking about grid, transmission lines and the rest of it. What about you could actually generate the energy close to where you need it?
Because you don't want a power plant next to your house.
You don't.
I'll put a solar panel, though. How about top the earth?
Right. So you've got solar panels, you've got ground and air source heat, you've got heat capture, you've got underground energy plant. You say you don't want one. You got one under this building.
You're talking about geothermal?
I'm talking about cogeneration, actually. So the first asset that Michael Bloomberg put in your new office when you opened it in London was a cogeneration system, because he knows that you combined electrical thermal efficiency standards mean you can operate buildings much more efficiently if you generate the energy where you need it. So the short answer is the world's biggest problem is that most of it's wasted. The world's biggest solution to climate change, to economic performance and competitiveness, and the cheapest is by decentralizing the energy network, bringing energy generation to the point of use. And the other thing that Michael Bloomberg did for Bloomberg was actually change the infrastructure inside the buildings so it doesn't waste. And so about 30% of America's buildings leak energy out of the windows through lighting, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Change the lights, change the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and it transforms the energy system. So to come back to the ESG, ESG is well-meaning, impact investment is well-meaning, but what if you can start to make investments that are not only more competitive, cheaper, cleaner, more reliable, but actually drive the economy? And that is what we focus on.
Isn't it, from a building perspective, isn't it more expensive to do those things?
No, I'll give you a very, very quick example. The classic one is taking LED lights. I know it sounds a bit like everybody's done it, they haven't. You take a 60-watt lamp, you replace it with a 6-watt lamp. You can do the math. It's 90% less energy to do the same job, even if the light bulb costs you 2 or 3 times more money.
And the bulbs don't get hot.
The bulbs don't get hot, and therefore you don't need the cooling to cool the room down again. The payback period's 2 or 3 years. So the cost is, what am I paying for? Over what period of time?
Jonathan, why does it not happen quicker?
So I write a lot about this subject. I wrote a book about it. I write a Substack.
Is it because the establishment doesn't want it to go fast?
I wrote my answer to the question is it's actually the perfect problem. What I mean by that, and the energy system is full of brilliant companies. Yeah. Everybody in the supply chain is brilliant at what they do. You have an extraction firm. They do a great job. They vent gas and flare it. It gets complained about, but it's economically, they figure it's the best thing that they can do. You build a power plant, a nuke or a gas power plant. They're operating as economically efficiently as they could and should do, right?
Right.
But you have a transmission distribution line. It's economically, it's perfected to its particular.
Those distribution line people don't want it to go away.
But you put it all together as a system, and it doesn't make any sense at all. So each component of the supply chain or value chain for energy is. This is why I call it the perfect problem, perfected for its shareholders, but you knit it together and it doesn't make any system sense. And that's why decentralizing energy, bringing it to the point of use, is a fundamental different approach to making energy.
As we've learned here in the U.S. with the problems that the Texas power grid faced a couple of years ago, we're on an aging infrastructure here, and it's sort of this patchwork where things are different in each state, and when you cross state lines, things change. How do you make it work in a place like the U.S.?
So I have, we've invested well over $1 billion here in the U.S. I'm excited because Donald Trump says if you invest in more than $1 billion in the U.S., you can have all sorts of good things, and I'm looking forward to that.
Wait till January 20th.
Yeah, but so our $1 billion has gone into exactly this, right? So we own a very large energy system in upstate New York, in Rochester. When it gets very cold, and it will over the next couple of months, the grid struggles to provide energy. We don't, because we generate the energy on site for our customers. So, state by state, we build resilient on-site energy generation solutions. We own it through a public company that we manage in London. We have other systems here that do rooftop solar nationwide. We own a company called Onyx, which does nationwide solar and storage. Again, resilient, on-site, clean power that's cheaper than the grid.
So I mean, again, the big step of how we get there, because I always talk about the establishment, the old systems that are in place. Yeah. It's really hard to break them up. And there's also a lot of money involved that people will lose if those are broken up. So how do we get there? Is it government policy that incents people once again? Or companies? Or like, how do we get there? Or does it just evolve?
I think this is an evolution rather than a revolution. It sounds a bit trite, but it's because the systems that we build, for example, that are on site are of benefit to the utility. I'll give you a great example, something we were talking about earlier as well. Yeah. Take data centers. Data centers are a tremendous user of energy all day, all night, and all year, hundreds of megawatts of power demand. Where do you get it from? You normally get it from the grid, but the grid struggles to provide the power that you need for new data centers. So we have a business which focuses on building power for data centers, but it's also providing services to the grid. So, we're providing a solution to both the local grid so that we can provide firm grid capacity and picking up the juice requirements from the data centers.
How's that power being generated for these data centers?
So we generate power 24/7 using natural gas cogeneration, but we integrate renewables and storage to make sure that we can get the lowest carbon footprint, the highest level of reliability and the lowest cost.
I do wonder in terms of oil and renewables, we just got 20 seconds. Renewables, I mean, do we continue to move towards renewables?
Yeah, but again, why build them in the middle of nowhere when you can build them on site? Do both at least, and I think this is the point I make. Let's be efficient at the same time.
It's like nearshoring and onshoring for everything, like in our backyard, right?
You have the Department of Government Efficiency of the US. If it looked at how much energy is wasted, do you know how much the cost of energy is in America? $4.5 trillion. 2/3 of that's wasted. You could save $2 trillion a year.
Our thanks to Jonathan Maxwell, founder and CEO of Sustainable Development Capital, and the author of the book, The Edge, How Competition for Resources is Pushing the World and Its Climate to the Brink.
That wraps up the first hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek from Bloomberg Radio. Ahead in our next hour, from what not to wear to building a $72 million a year beauty empire, we check in with entrepreneur Trini Woodall.
Plus, she tapped her pride and influence of Harlem to become the first African-American woman to launch a commercially distributed beer. The CEO of Harlem Brewing, on how she did it.
And Christmas and Hanukkah are this week. And if you are still mulling over gifts for friends and loved ones, our Pursuits team has the ultimate guide. Everything from the simple to the sublime.
And from the not so cheap to the somewhat affordable. Okay, we're talking $10 Pump Street chocolate. To a $164,000 Eternal calendar.
We're talking about a watch.
Prices go up from there. Also, lots of gifts in between.
Yes, indeed. It's a fun list. This is Bloomberg Businessweek.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Plenty ahead in our second hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Businessweek, including the founder of Harlem Brewing on becoming the first African-American woman to own a brewery in the United States.
Plus, if you're still looking for a last-minute gift this holiday season, our Bloomberg Pursuits team has you covered. From an $86,000 Bulgari necklace to $15 worth of chocolate martini olive almonds that are not meant to be shaken nor stirred, or a timepiece that will last a lifetime. You know when I say timepiece, I'm talking about a watch that just is expensive, right?
We know it's Pursuits.
Or really several lifetimes, I should say.
Exactly. First up this hour, though, an entrepreneur and business owner, columnist and author, and before all of that, a co-host of the BBC TV show, very popular BBC TV show, What Not to Wear, helping women all over the world discover their individual style and become more confident at the same time. Full disclosure, I've been a huge fan of Trini Woodall.
Today, Trini is founder and CEO of the digital-first beauty brand Trini London. Since founding the business back in 2017, the business has scaled into a global brand, shipping things like skincare and makeup to customers in more than 170 countries, as well as operating retail stores across the UK, Ireland, Australia, and the US.
Yeah, and she was actually in town here in New York City to work on that expansion in the United States. Trini joined us to talk about the growth of her direct-to-consumer platform and the challenges of being a woman in the VC world. We started our conversation going back a few years to Trini's beginning, writing a newspaper column followed by hosting the BBC TV hit show, What Not to Wear.
I think we came along at a time in the 90s when we just gave some rules. We did a show which was, titles that TV make, but it was based on a column called What Not to Wear, and it was just about the first time perhaps saying, everyone is different. Everyone has different body shape. It doesn't matter your size. Everyone has different skin, hair, and eye. And so it resonated because that language perhaps hadn't been spoken before. And interestingly, we'd done a book before which sold 13,000 copies. We did a TV show. The next
I think
book.
I have the book. I'm going to be very quite honest with you.
But that first book, nobody has. They didn't
so maybe
even
it's the second
want to
book.
do a book deal. But then after we did that show, we sold 1 million copies of the book.
That's
because there was, and it was very basic rules. It
Yeah.
was, if you have small boobs, do this. If you have big boobs, and you know, don't wear a polo neck if you have. It just, people come up and say, I never do that again because of you. And so that was very interesting then. All right, but the way the story was told on TV was shock TV. You know, it was just before times of a show like The Swan, which was that extreme makeover. It was the beginning of very different TV. And when we then had done that for 10 years, and we stopped doing it in the UK because other people came up, what I loved most, it was challenging at the time because we were suddenly not wanted, but we went to MIPCOM, which is a TV conference in Cannes, and about 12 countries bought the format, from Israel to Poland to India to Australia to Scandinavia. So I went from just understanding British women and America to then understanding it doesn't matter your religion, your age, the color of your skin, these emotional stages that we go through as women have a relevance on our confidence levels, on how we want to project ourselves. And that was fantastic research. Everything I've done probably since I was 6.5 is research for where I am now.
I just want to talk a little bit about the changing media landscape over that time, because a lot has happened in the last 25, 30 years since that show. And I'm wondering, when you look around the landscape today, whether you see something on streaming, whether you see what's going on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, where you kind of see the influence of what you were doing on the BBC.
The point of reference where we get our influence has changed, and I love evolution. I love the fact that there was a very small, controlled set of people who gave you your influence, and now it's all up for grabs, because I think that's an egalitarian state. And you choose. You don't have to get a subscription to Vogue magazine. You can choose who you follow and what you like. So you have far more individual. It's like you're choosing your meal from an a la carte menu. It's not a set menu.
Right.
So the benefit of that evolution has been that you can go and be influenced by somebody who's far more like you individually as a person, or somebody you aspire to be, as opposed to a brand setting the tone like a magazine or a newspaper title that we've all followed for years.
Well, let's get to what you're doing now, Trinity London, right? It's funny, I brought up your name in our makeup room this morning, and I have a beloved makeup artist. She's worked with Charlotte Tilbury, she's worked with, I think, Prescriptives, maybe Bobbi Brown, like a lot of brands. She's like, oh my God, she's doing, she talked about your brand. It's a crowded space though. You launched in 2017. When you thought about it and your journey you talk about of what you've learned, how did you think about entering the space, what you wanted to do differently? Because it is so competitive.
I knew exactly what I wanted to do. The challenge was convincing investors it was the right choice. So I knew the biggest white space was a 35 plus woman. I knew that she'd been talked to with companies that were represented by a 20-year-old model. I knew she felt excluded from the conversation, but she was being sold something that might be relevant for her, but wasn't in a language for her, because every advertiser is going after a younger audience, even though the older audience maybe has the money.
Right.
So there was this sort of dichotomy, and I felt that I had already organically understood this woman, and I knew what products she wanted. I knew her frustrations. I knew when she went up to the beauty counter, the challenges she had about thinking, is the person serving me here going to be, plastering me in makeup, or going to be thinking I'm younger or older? Is she going to understand me? And so I really felt that you could develop online with personalization, which I'd loved since 99 when I started my first tech company called Ready2, before even ecom. But I loved personalization and I love data. So I thought, if I can build an algorithm where I can figure this woman out and I can say, tell me this about you, and we will tell you what suits you. And I pitched that this woman, 35, 40, 45, would do that. And every investor for the first 6 months, I saw 250 people, got one investor.
You saw 250 investors? I
pitched 250 investors, and I got one investment at the beginning, and then people followed, but was very much, love the idea, but those old ladies will never buy it, so do it for a Gen X and a Gen A. Gen A wasn't even around 8 years ago. Gen X, okay. And I was like, but you don't get it. This woman will come online if she feels she's got something she can trust.
Right.
And it will deliver.
Have any of those investors come knocking since?
Yes.
How did those conversations go? I mean, they passed in an earlier round. They would have gotten a better deal.
I think a nice, there's moments in your life you celebrate. And one moment was going to a tech conference where I used to go to this tech conference every year, which will remain nameless, but I would always feel, an outsider. I'd feel I haven't got investment yet. When you're really in that pitch mode and you're trying to get people interested and you bump into somebody who's said no to you and you sort of like put on the brave face and you're still committed and you still know it's going to work. You just got to find that right person.
Right.
And 3 years later, we just had an article in Forbes, and it was a very good article. It gave a value to business, which we hadn't given them. And then I went to this conference again, and there were like 4 people there who had to turn me down, and they were like, "Hey, Trini, we must talk." and one of them, I just couldn't, and I went, "Oh, we're not looking for investment right now because we're EBITDA positive." But it was just that, and I think there's that tiny moment where you think.
But Trini, we talk about this a lot, about women entrepreneurs, even from women venture capitalists, have even a hard time getting funding. And you are a known entity. And why do you think that still is?
I think it's a mix. I had to learn really how to pitch. I had to learn to speak a language I wasn't used to, because I am the type of woman who wants to go in and bring you into the world of what I see Trini London will do.
Right.
And get you to know that woman. And it's so, I'm not going to say it's overwhelming for a classic investor, but sometimes somebody wants to say, this is A, and then from A, I'll get to B, and then once I got B, I'll get to C. And so I then realized I had to tell the journey differently. I knew what they needed to know first. And, I was asked a lot, how will you protect your downside? Not how will you optimize your upside? And I did feel, if I was a man in the room, would that have been the first question? Or would it be man to man, how are you going to optimize the upside?
Do you think it would not have been?
I don't know. I'm not going to judge. I think it's a type of person. Yeah. But I would... I did have to learn that, because I'm not I've learned to be a CEO. There's 250 people in Trini London now, but that's been a journey. And I even got a CEO coach because I wanted to be the best CEO I could be and understand the importance of how I delegate where I'm in the weeds, meeting people who say, do what only you can do. Otherwise you'll never grow because you'll always be doing too much in the weeds. So that journey is a challenging journey for a founder, to be a CEO in a business that's doing over 50 or 100 million, or, as you grow, you need to have that team that is going to execute really well. And you are looking at the strategic vision of where the business is going and doing less of the everyday. So for me, the switch from that to this is a big challenge.
No, it's a learning process, especially as you get bigger, right? Otherwise you get caught in stuff. Tell us about Trini London. How big you've gotten. Talk to us about growth. We're Bloomberg. We do love numbers. Tell us what you can do.
What numbers can I tell you? I'll tell you what, when I started, it was the time of real growth. It was a time of, it didn't matter about retention. It was only about new customer numbers. And I remember we had a sort of 50-50, and they were saying you need to be 30% existing, 70% new. And I was like, I don't agree. I want retention. I want a long-term cohort. I want the customer who will buy 4 times a year and be with me in 10 years. Right. That's the customer I want. And that was challenging. So even on my second round, the valuation I was looking for, I didn't get, because they were like, you should be 70-30. And I was like, I'm happy with 50-50.
Yeah.
And then into COVID, we had a ton of people who were waiting for us to come to a store. And because they thought I'm at home for a while, they then went and bought, and then they became customers, and those are long-term cohorts. So the reference now in the world we live in D2C is, it is about retention. It's really about retention.
But it's also about retail. Like, you haven't shunned away.
Yes.
You are direct to consumer, but you also embrace retail.
And I think retail has a part to play. Retail for a real D2C brand, like earlier D2C brands, would literally be just brand building. Right. But retail needs to be profitable and brand building. It can't just be brand building, because I think then you don't get to have a good EBITDA. So how do you, it's
expensive, right?
It's expensive, and we did a flagship in the UK, and we spent money on that flagship, but in 3.5 months it paid for itself. So that's great. Yeah. And it's, in the other store in London, which is a big store, we are number 1 in beauty. But here in Prince Street, I saw it I thought we have to put an inroad. We're in Saks, we have to put an inroad of our proposition of what we represent, of this personalization in a space so you can walk in the world of us, because that visual, and this is where online and offline is really interesting. If somebody's going to buy online, they need these 5 points of reference: their friend, an Instagram they follow, maybe still a magazine, maybe listening to Bloomberg Radio, but also seeing the brand physically in their country in some form in the real world is really important. So the conversion we have online since we've got Prince Street, which I fitted out in IKEA with mirror on the top, because I thought the investment here has got to be in the buzz.
Right.
It's not going to be dumping $300,000 in a 6-month pop-up. It's going to be $4,000 at IKEA with very nice mirrors on the top, because our products are great. So, you know.
Did that work? Did the IKEA part work?
It's so busy. This weekend it was... It's so exciting because we did a morning show and we had, and also this is interesting because you don't know how well TV works. And the next day there were people who'd watched the show coming in to the store. Right. And I thought it's interesting how media works now.
So when you talk about strategy, we've talked retail, we've talked digital. What about social media and actually using the platforms to sell? Increasingly, we're seeing TikTok, Instagram becoming sort of centers of e-commerce.
TikTok Shop has been interesting because in different territories, it's had different premiumness. We are a premium brand. So TikTok US has a slightly different inventory of things than TikTok UK. So I think they're finding their feet. I would say the US has probably more maturity. So there's more bigger brands going on there. So maybe a Charlotte Tilbury might be on TikTok Shop now.
Right.
Instagram, they did TikTok, they did a version of their shopping before, do you remember? But they're bringing back now this sort of live stream shopping, which Facebook had worked with a few years ago. And it is something that I find fascinating.
Amazon tried this years ago too.
Amazon tried it years ago, but there is...
It's huge in China.
It's huge in China.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of the success of QVC and what is the modern version of QVC, it is what social media should be.
I mean, it's wild to see the stats of the people in China and how much money they make.
I mean, that woman was 15 million in a day or something insane. But that was a 10-second in a box. That's just it's an anomaly. I don't get it. It's something that's so of that culture.
So have you cracked the TikTok and the Instagram part yet?
We do it in a way that a few people do what we do, is we don't say buy. We tell you a story, and lots of people tell the story. I tell the story. Our friends of Trinity London tell the story.
Right.
And they tell a story. They're not saying buy this, it's this much, this is what's in it.
Listen, so much a part of your story, I think it was so telling about how many people you had to pitch before somebody was interested in helping to fund. You now are helping others. And tell us a little bit about, we've got about a minute and a half left here. Elevator pitch your series on Instagram, because you're helping others. 30 seconds, they make a pitch to you.
So I just felt that challenge when you're younger to get, or not younger, but when you're at a much smaller stage. So they all apply, and they have to be doing over 150,000 a year in revenue, because that's somebody who then is committed to starting a business. Used to be less, but you have to, and because you're giving precious airtime, and then they have that pitch, and then we highlight their business, and they convert, and then. I also was there's something in the UK of 50 women doing over £50 million revenue a year. So we were thinking, how can we get 50 women to get over £10 million a year rev? Because that's another hick. So we're looking at that now as another concept. But it is so important to lift up other women. And I think in the 90s, it was challenging for women to lift up other women. It was very different. It was a really ruthless sense in business. And I think there is a responsibility as a woman, especially when you've been on that journey of entrepreneurship and you know how challenging it is. I went to Bhutan recently, and I now mentor this Bhutanese designer because I just thought she really needs help, and she's fantastic. And so it's exciting to take these different women and think, how can you help them to look at the challenges they have?
Just got a few seconds left here. So what's next? Or what do you, I don't know, what's your 3-year
growth in the US, for sure. I mean, this year it's about growth in the US.
This is an important market.
This is such an important market. This market ultimately, for me, should be double the size of the UK. So I am a UK brand coming to the US. That is in itself a big challenge. If we look at the successful UK brands that have come here, there are not that. Tilbury, phenomenal success. Right. Charles Tyrwhitt Shirt Company, really good success.
Stores all over.
Yeah. So it's looking at, how as a brand, you make a US customer feel this is a brand that speaks to me. It doesn't matter the origination of where that brand started. This is a brand emotionally for me. And that's our challenge, to show American women we understand you, and this is for you, and our products are for you, and how we think about you as an individual will help you.
Well, come back and let us know how it's going
as
you settle in even more here. Trini, thank you so much. Trini Whittle, she is CEO and founder of Trini London, joining us right here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Thank you so much.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
All right, Tim, you know we love talking to entrepreneurs, those who have built a company over something often they love. Sometimes it all happens, though, by accident.
That's what Celeste Beatty did. She fused her love for craft beer and her hometown of Harlem to become the founder of the Harlem Brewing Company. She also created her own cookbook titled Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. She's also the first African-American woman brewer to launch a commercially distributed beer. She joined me alongside Bloomberg's Nora Melinda to share how it all started.
I did start as a home brewer in my studio apartment at the time in Harlem. The home brewing kit was a gift that I didn't use for quite a while, so things didn't turn out that great.
It kind of happens with like these type of gifts, right?
It does. But I wasn't deterred and decided to get another kit and keep trying to brew, and voila.
Okay, so a lot happened in between that and voila.
Lots of beers.
Some trial and error.
Some trial and error.
Absolutely.
What was it? You weren't even like initially attracted to, it wasn't like, you had been drinking beer and saw this homebrew kit and went to buy it and thought you could do it yourself. What was the moment where you realized, hey, I actually like doing this?
Cooking.
Okay.
Cooking with beer, cooking with wine. I like to experiment with things. And infusing beer was something I fell in love with early on. Wine and even spirits. It just gave a whole nother layer of flair that I didn't know.
Wait, so the cooking brought you to beer?
Pretty much. I mean, I did try a little bit of beer in college and a few other places. But anyway.
As one does.
But cooking is what really gave me a passion. And then learning about the history.
I mean, what were some of your favorite dishes? Of course, maybe in the amateur stage of playing around with this trial and error beer, what were you cooking?
Soups.
Okay.
My initial tool was my mom's soup pot. And I was able to basically do soup and add the beer to the soups that I made. Vegetable soup, stews. It just added so much flavor to it that I never experienced before, that I fell in love with. And then a few of my friends said, this isn't bad.
I always thought you were supposed to use not good beer to cook. Like the microbrews you kind of leave for drinking. I know this is true with wine. You sort of, use the junky wine to cook.
Well, I think...
what am I getting wrong here?
Junky wine might mean junky food. I don't know. But no. I mean, the essence is always
obviously
there.
I'm not a sommelier.
Yeah, well, at the time that I was cooking with beer, it was your Sam Adams, your Anchor Steams. I was looking at trying to find something.
This was what, the 1990s?
1990s.
Okay.
So
and there wasn't a whole craft brew movement at that point.
There really wasn't exactly. I mean, it wasn't like now 9,500 breweries. I mean, there's so many different amazing beers out there. But at the time, there really weren't that many, and certainly not in a local marketplace.
So how did you really get this off of its feet? I imagine you started out by having your friends try everything, and they were like, we got to take it and show it to other people. Tell me about that origin story.
Yeah. First letting them taste it in the food dishes that I love to make. My spaghetti sauces, my stews, my soups. I would share that. And then when I started actually home brewing, I was able to share those cans and bottles. Actually, at the time, there were no canners. With my friends, restaurants, Sylvia's Restaurants. I told the story many times. Is one of the restaurants I shared my home brews with, and they were also the first restaurant to give us an order. And that feedback just grew. And the other thing that happened is that the community that became my home, Harlem, the village of Harlem, was going through what some say is a second renaissance. A lot of entrepreneurship, revitalization going on. So a lot of people around me were starting businesses. And I began to get feedback from them and was encouraged after some of the not so great brews got better. They were like, this isn't bad. I think you're onto something here.
So fast forward a couple decades. Here we are.
A couple of decades.
2024.
2024. 2025.
You do have cans of beer now. How do you get to the point where you go from home brewing to actually opening a brewery, the infrastructure involved with that, the investment involved with that. How do you make it into a business?
There's a number of ways that you can get there. One is, as I said, contract brewing, collaboration brewing. We took the collaboration brewery route because it was difficult to open up a brewery in the middle of a community, especially a historic community like Harlem. You really want to respect it. You want to be mindful of where you are, many beautiful churches and institutions. So I went the route of home brewing my beer first, and then establishing Harlem Brewing Company, and then going to an amazing brewery in Saratoga Springs, New York, where we canned our first bottle and then eventually canned our recipes.
Is that still, sorry, Nora, go ahead.
I just wanted to talk a bit more about the challenges as we've been discussing. I mean, of course, when we think about beer, I immediately think of white men. It's a white male dominated space. What is it like being a Black woman in the industry?
It's now it's better. At the time, I would go into places and they thought I was coming there to do a promotion. I could tell them about beer, speak about the ingredients, and talk about beer, but it kind of went over many people's heads. They were like, "What are you talking about? Aren't you here to do a promotion?" But it was tough, not just as a Black woman, but as a woman in general. But over time, as more women through the Pink Boots Society, I can give them a shout out. More and more women have come into the industry, so we have more peers to talk to. So it's gotten a lot better, but I think women only represent about 7% of the brewers, and probably less than 25% of the teams, parts of the teams and staff of breweries.
Were you surprised to find that you are the first Black woman to own a brewery in the U.S.? Like when that happened, were you like, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense?
I said, no way I can be the first Black woman in America to launch a commercial beer. I usually state it that way. But I think because of the complications of our history, there are many other Black women that brewed beer. I mean, you can look through the records during enslavement, prior to enslavement, all over the continent of Africa, there are Black women, Black and brown women that brew beer. So I just think maybe that story hasn't been told, and there is a story that we told through a beer we made to celebrate the life of Patsy Young, who was an enslaved brewer who became free and brewed freely for 14 years in eastern North Carolina. Whoopi Goldberg actually lended her face to that story, and we launched that beer last year. So that's one of the stories I point to, because that was 1806. So there are women that are unknown, but when you uncover the history and you start talking about those stories, you discover that really pretty much everything except maybe the tech stuff, somebody's done it. So
Well, I want to dig into, back to the food. I'm a foodie. Digging back into this book, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul cookbook, food cookbook. What are some of your favorite dishes? What should we be looking for in this cookbook?
Well, we celebrated our 50th family reunion in North Carolina in July, and there's always a competition of who's going to make the best banana pudding, mac and cheese, you know, what's the dish? And the dish for my family, particularly on the dessert end, is banana pudding. So we make, in the book, there's a recipe that honors my aunt, Betty, which is a brew nana pudding. So we infuse our Harlem Renaissance wheat beer. It's not a hoppy beer. It's very light on the hops. It has coriander, cumin, grains of paradise, and orange peel. So that type of a beer and a banana pudding infuses those flavors, gives us a nice, subtle flavors of some of the spices in the beer. So that's a brew nana pudding. And then we have our beer smack and cheese, which we'll be actually serving at a charitable event on 119th Street in Harlem to support the homeless El Refectorio. That dish is a beer mac and cheese dish infused with a beer sauce. So we use one of the beers in the sauce, and we layer that into all the layers of the mac and cheese.
I'm hearing about this family reunion, and I'm wondering, is it really a competition when it comes to food? Like, are there more than just one? Is there more than one person with a cookbook out? Like, you have the cookbook out. You've been cooking your whole career.
Sounds like she won.
Is there really a competition going on here? You're explaining this food to me, and I'm like, I wouldn't want to go up against this at any family reunion.
Well,
I'm not bringing my...
it's not an official competition, but when the lineup goes on that long table...
Okay, what does it look like?
All the main courses, the side dishes, and the desserts, it becomes a competition. Because everybody knows who made which dish.
I wouldn't want my food next to yours. That's all I'm saying.
Certainly is kind of competitive.
I wouldn't either.
Hey, does every...
Come to the reunion.
I will gladly do that. Does every recipe in here, in this book, involve beer?
Yeah, everything from beer cocktails to beer sorbet.
These are all things I don't realize that you can put beer into. Like,
Right.
Absolutely. More than what you can use wine for.
does the alcohol get cooked off?
Most
Can
of
I
it.
give this stuff to my kids?
Oh, well.
She's
Not the beer.
I don't know
not
about
the
that.
not the beer cocktails, but
Well,
Maybe the mac and
you
cheese.
could. I mean, my
should I?
She's like, I'm
got
not going
to
to
taste
stop
beer
you.
a little bit growing up, so I think you could. I wouldn't go overboard with it, but there are some kid-friendly dishes in there, I would say, in
Just got to
moderation.
flip through.
Can you talk a little about the recipe for this, and also the idea that there are these sort of trends within the beer industry? You know, IPAs were huge for so many years, then everybody did an IPA, and then they kind of went out of style, and then farmhouse saisons. Like, what are people loving right now?
Sounds like you know a little bit about beer.
A little bit, yeah.
Well,
I'm known
IPAs
to
are still very
sip some
popular.
beers.
IPAs are still very popular.
Okay.
This is on the hazy side, a New England style IPA. It has about 5 different varieties of hops. If you're familiar with hops, Mosaic hops.
Break that down
hops.
for me.
Hops.
Me, a non-beer drinker. Break that down for me.
It's a flower.
Okay.
It has bittering facets to it. It also has some citrus, some spice. It layers in flavor.
Sounds great.
In the IPAs, it gives it a very deep, sometimes very juicy, citrusy, piney flavor and aroma. So they're flavoring hops, and they're also bittering hops that give hops sort of the balance of sweetness in the malt. That's kind of the role that it plays. I love growing hops. They're amazing. They're so many different uses beyond beer, and they're great to grow. They're perennials. But it's a beautiful sort of pine cone shaped flower that grows from April through August. Is a growth period takes place during that time. Harvest takes place during the fall.
So we have the beer, we have the cookbook.
Yes.
What is the next chapter? I mean, I feel like you've done it all, honestly, but
hardly.
As we're going into 2025, what are you thinking in terms of business expansion?
Definitely thinking about more how do we support our communities. We have Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We're working on a project there that involves brewing education, working with black and brown farmers in eastern North Carolina to grow grains, to get more engaged in the industry. We have our project in Brixton in the UK. That's about bonds across the pond. How do we sort of connect common threads and common cultures around beer? And got a couple of projects we're working on. Our project in Rocky Mount, and then working on something in Harlem, sort of full circle from where we started with Bloomberg.
10 seconds. Where can people buy the beer, and where is it distributed?
The beer can be purchased locally at Craft and Carry, Whole Foods, Melba's Restaurant, Boulevard Bistro, Total Wine and More. What was the rest of it?
Distribution, outside of New York City?
Distribution primarily in the Northeast, also in the Southeast, and in the UK.
So it can be bought many, many different places.
Many places. You can order it through Uber Eats and things of that nature as well.
Celeste Beatty, she is the founder of Harlem Brewing Company, the new cookbook, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
When you're unsure of what to get a loved one for a gift, your best bet is to return to tried and true treasures. Say a beautiful piece of jewelry, a sought-after bag, a timepiece that will last a lifetime. They're all classics for a reason, guaranteed to bring cheer year after year. So writes Bloomberg Pursuits contributor Kristen Shirley.
It's all in the Pursuits team's Best Gifts of 2024. Currently featured in a Businessweek magazine, out on newsstands now, online at Bloomberg.com, and on the Bloomberg terminal. Here with more is the editor of Bloomberg Pursuits, Chris Rouser, along with a Bloomberg contributing writer and founder of La Patiala, the luxury encyclopedia, Kristen Shirley. Chris, I want to start with you because gift guides always interesting and offer up a variety of gifts and price points.
Yeah.
What's the approach at Bloomberg Pursuits?
So what we do at Bloomberg is not a million different gift guides with lists like 57 gifts for your boyfriend's mom. We do gifts that are appealing to everyone and hopefully are inspiration points for people to think about what they should get, maybe discover something they haven't seen before, and go out and have fun shopping. So this year, as we were brainstorming what would be the sort of organizing principle, we thought, let's do the classics. These are classics for a reason. We'll do, bracelets and bags and watches and spirits and home decor stuff, beauty stuff, and we'll just do updated spins on those old-time real standbys. And so Kristen went out into the world and just found all these cool new updates on the classics. And we always have a page that's like offbeat stuff, which is my favorite too, which is just if you want surprise, if you want something strange. And then we shot it really beautifully by the photographer Joanna McClure.
All right. So, Kristen, you're given this mission. Tell us how, because I'm assuming there's a fair amount of stuff out there. So how do you weed through kind of what you want to include?
Well, throughout the year, as I take appointments and I see what's going on in the luxury world, I'll earmark certain things. I'll think, ooh, that'd be amazing for the Bloomberg gift guide. And then other times I'll see what's new and fits the theme. So this one was really interesting because we were doing classics with a twist. So we got to feature some things that we wouldn't maybe ordinarily cover because they wouldn't be newsy enough, but we found things that had cool new twists like Dom Perignon with a beautiful label with artwork from Basquiat. We found new releases from brands, and sometimes it was something as simple as updating a new Patek Philippe watch that was an icon, the Ellipse, and that was our twist for that watch.
All right, so maybe we should go through the categories because there's a lot of stuff here, and I do like the offbeat items. There's actually something I kind of adore.
You want the surfboard?
No.
She wants the Porsche surfboard.
I want the bag with the. I want the
Porsche
whale.
surfboard.
I want the whale bag or whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
I really love it. But let's go back. Let's go back to jewelry, which is a fave. I think about when my husband and I first got engaged. Like jewelry, like these are the things that, kind of come. Chris, walk us through. And I do love that you guys have, I think, a variety of price points here.
I mean, it's jewelry.
I know.
What do you mean by variety, Carol? Carol means price upon request is a variety.
All right, so
it's a surprise if it's price upon request.
Really expensive.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing on the page is a Mikimoto lace necklace that has 7 strands of Akoya pearls with a almost 6.5 carat pear-shaped aquamarine. That is $141,000. It's one of a kind. It's a very, very special
Stunning.
gift. But, there's a Van Cleef and Arpels Sweet Alhambra watch, which is more approachable in price at $18,600. And that's like an inspiration for you to maybe your girlfriend, maybe you have some Alhambra stuff from Van Cleef, but you didn't think of getting a watch. That's a new way of using that style of jewelry. So we're trying to get you to think about new ways of using this kind of thing. Kristen, do you have a favorite jewelry item here?
For me, it's the Boucheron eternity necklace. This design was first invented in 1879, and it's just so beautiful and chic. It doesn't have a clasp. It opens and just wraps around your neck in such a beautiful way. And this particular version has a pear-shaped sapphire that's 12 carats.
And this is the one that's $509,000.
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
We have expensive taste.
That's just checking.
The question is whether or not you can afford it.
I know the answer.
Or the question really is, how much do you love your spouse?
Ouch. It's so true, though. All right.
Hey, there's some stuff in here that's $3,900. The David Yurman Streamlined Signet Ring.
Yeah, and if you go online, there's a bunch more stuff in a wider variety of price points too, which is very helpful. But we love David Yurman, and they have a lot of great gifts for men. A lot of men are getting more into jewelry, and David Yurman is like the place to go.
All right, let's talk liquor. So, Kristen, how'd you approach liquor? You talked about art on the bottle. We often, on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, have various folks who are offering up new wine, and a lot of times the bottles are just gorgeous.
Yeah, I think that's what we really wanted to focus on here. You can see there's a bottle by the Macallan. It's called Time Space Mastery, and it's actually a sphere. You could call it a donut-shaped bottle, it's just so striking. You almost don't want to drink it because you want that beautiful bottle to be sitting on your shelf with the amber liquid inside of it. And then we have some interesting art collaborations that Glenn Morangi, they collaborated with the Japanese floral artist to make this actual floral sculpture, photographed it, and then put that on the bottle. So people are taking different approaches to making these really stunning bottles that are a little bit of works of art.
I do love this Hibiki 40 years old, the oldest whiskey yet. It's going to set you back, though.
Yeah, it's really special. They aged it in Japanese and Spanish oak barrels for 40 years, obviously. It's, I think, the oldest one that they've ever done, and it's produced in such limited quantities that it is truly a collector's item. I think a lot of these bottles, unfortunately, won't get open and enjoyed because people will look at them more of an asset because they cost $35,000. But it'll be interesting to see how Hibiki continues to progress the ultra high-end version of the market.
All right, Chris, where do you want to go?
Well, I just want to say Beyonce's rye whiskey is on this list, and it's $89, and everyone says it's good. I've not had it, but it's whiskey people like it, so that's a great gift.
It is good.
Oh, okay, cool. Where do you want to go next?
Our next page is the offbeat page, which is my fave.
Hence the whale bag or whatever it is.
Yeah, let's talk about this whale bag.
Sorry, I'm sure you have a better description, Kristen.
Yeah, so this is from Loewe, which is a really beautiful Spanish leather house, and it's an updated version of the iconic puzzle bag. So it's strips of leather that are pieced together, kind of looking like a puzzle, and here it has a painted whale design on it, and it's part of a resort collection focused on under the sea, and it's just so fun and playful and certainly a little offbeat, but still very elegant at the same time.
What does it cost?
Almost $4,000.
Okay. It's kind of delicious. I just kind of love it.
One of my favorite things from the whole section is actually this spilled espresso martini glass, which is on the first page of the section. And it's literally a martini glass that's spilled, and it's glass, but it looks like it's a spilled espresso martini. And I just immediately thought of 5 people that I could get it for. And I think that's very funny. And then the most surprising thing that Kristen pitched was this pair of wired Chanel headphones. I don't know if you guys have noticed that people are wearing wired headphones.
Yeah,
again.
It's like a big TikTok thing for the youngs.
Yes, for the youngs. And not being a young, it took me a while to catch on to it. And I was like, no one's going to want this. And Kristen was like, no, it's a real thing. And so these are like a very blingy Chanel chain that you wear around your neck and then connects to your listening device.
$14,700 for headphones.
And it's a watch.
Oh.
So the necklace has a watch on it and the headphones. So it really does it all.
Wait, so it's a necklace, a watch, and headphones? I mean, this is a bargain. I'm just going to talk.
Yeah, right? It's basically free.
Chris, the surfboards on the online version of the gift guide, Porsche, I didn't even know Porsche made surfboards.
Porsche doesn't, but Porsche Design, which is like a sister company to Porsche, makes a lot of different things. They make sunglasses, they make skateboards, they make watches primarily, and they have this special partnership where they made multiple sizes and multiple colors of surfboards that you can customize with numbers and the colors you want, and they're very cool.
7'10" mid-length board. It's still an expensive surfboard at $4,500.
Kristen, I have to ask you, is there a favorite item on the list that you just think is, I don't know, just super yummy?
Well, I think all the bags are really beautiful, and there are some really special ones in here with, beautiful embellishments, sequins. We picked a metallic theme because, everyone likes sparkly things for the holidays. And I just love this Fendi Peekaboo I See You. It's the brand signature Celleria stitching on the side, which is all done by hand, and it's in a really beautiful gold leather. So that's one of my favorite pieces. The IWC Portuguese or Eternal Calendar is another one of my favorite pieces. It is a moon phase that will be accurate for 45 million years and was by far one of my favorite watches to come out this year.
Yeah, be sure to leave it to the ancestors, 45 million years. Chris, is there... Like the watches, is that favorite for you? We know you love watches or
timepieces.
Do you have a favorite?
Timepieces.
Sorry.
No, they're both.
Or eternal calendars.
Tomato, timepieces. Well, actually, when I asked Kristen if we could get the IWC watch, the Eternal Calendar, and she was like, yeah. I was like, really? I was super psyched to shoot it. What I love on this page is the range. There's the Hermes Cut watch, which is not a very expensive kind of everyday watch that's for people. You could wear it to work. You could wear it swimming. We have this very cool new watch called the Papar Anillo, which is $750. It's a very innovative GMT, which means it tracks 2 time zones. It just looks very funky, and everyone would ask you about it if you wore it. And then we have some very cool, more flashy watches from Audemars Piguet and Vacheron, Constantine, and Rolex.
All right, Kristen, we've just got about 30 seconds left here. Too late for people to get stuff? I mean, this is going to be, it's the Christmas weekend, the Hanukkah weekend. You're still thinking about what I need to get for people. Is it too late to get some of this stuff?
Order today, next day air shipping, or get out this weekend and brave the crowds at the mall.
Go shopping.
You go right when they open.
Totally love it. Guys, thank you so much. Some really cool stuff there, Tim.
That's Bloomberg Pursuits editor Chris Rauser and Kristen Shirley, Bloomberg's contributing writer and founder of La Patiala.
And that wraps up our weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week from Bloomberg Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Monday through Friday starting at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg Radio, and on Sirius XM channel 121. You can also listen to us on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
You can also watch our daily broadcast on YouTube. Just search Bloomberg Global News. We're simulcast on Bloomberg Originals, available at Bloomberg.com/originals, and streaming platforms including Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Samsung TV Plus, and more.
Find our Bloomberg Business Week podcast at Bloomberg.com, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And the latest edition of the magazine is available on newsstands now at Bloomberg.com and always on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Tim Stenovec.
And I'm Carol Massar. Have a good and safe weekend. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays to everybody. Time to go shopping.
This is the Bloomberg Business Week podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business App. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.